The leather of my passenger seat, cracked and faded like an old riverbed, seemed to offend her more than my choice of restaurant. Her nose, a surgically perfected little slope, wrinkled in. This is vintage. Seth sighed, the word dripping with a kind of pitying disgust that was somehow worse than outright mockery. I offered a tight smile, my hands gripping the worn steering wheel of the '98 Corolla. It gets me from A to B, I replied. The same line I'd used a dozen times with a dozen other women who looked at my car with that same expression. It was a social experiment of sorts, one that had been yielding consistently depressing results. Her name was Tiffany, or maybe Stephanie. It didn't matter. She was the latest in a long, discouraging parade of blind dates set up by well-meaning friends who only knew one version of me, the idea of me. The successful, elegable, and presumably fabulously wealthy bachelor. They didn't know about the Corolla, which I kept in a small, private garage blocks away from the glass and steel tower where I actually lived. They didn't know that I preferred faded jeans to tailored suits, or that the thought of another gala, another charity auction, another conversation about stock portfolios and yacht maintenance made my soul ache with a profound, almost physical weariness. I just assumed, she continued, pulling out a compact to check her immaculate lipstick, that a man in your position would have something a little more representative. Representative of what? Esque genuinely curious. She snapped the compact shut with a decisive click. Of your success/silly. The rest of the dinner was a masterclass in polite condescension on her part and stoic endurance on mine. She talked about her recent trip to Monaco, the ghastly price of her new Louboutins, and the sheer tragedy of having to fly commercial because her father's jet was being serviced. I listened, nodded, and pushed a piece of oversauced chicken around my plate, felente familiare, crushing weight of my own life. The life everyone assumed I wanted. The life that felt like an exquisitely tailored, soul-crushing cage. It wasn't that I was ungrateful. I knew, on a rational level, that I was living a dream. At 28, I was the sole founder and CEO of Nexus Dynamics, a company that had not so much disrupted the tech industry as it had completely rewritten the rules. I had more money than I could ever spend, a penthouse that overlooked the entire city, and a level of influence that could make politicians tremble. But the man who had built that empire, the nerdy, passionate kid who had coded the first iteration of our flagship software in his parents' garage, had gotten lost somewhere along the way. He'd been replaced by this construct. This Ethan Vance, who was supposed to drive a supercar and date women like Tiffany or Stephanie. When the check came, she didn't even glance at it. I paid, of course. The walk back to the Corolla was quiet, but her silence was louder than any of her earlier chatter. It was a judgmental, disappointed silence. She was already mentally composing the text to the friend who had set us up, the one that would paint me as a cheap, eccentric, and ultimately, undateable loser. We pulled up to the curb in front of her apartment building, a sleek high-rise, with a doorman who eyed my car as if it were a stray dog. Well, Seth sighed, her voice bright and final. This was .. / an experience. I didn't answer. I just watched as she got out, smoothing down her dress. Then she leaned back in, her face a mask of faux concern. You know? Seth sighed, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. My cousin knows a guy who does amazing deals on last year's Mercedes models. You really should think about it. Image is everything. And that was it, the snap. The tiny, final thread of my patience breaking. I had endured the judgment, the condescension, the utter lack of genuine curiosity about who I was as a person. But this unsolicited, pitying advice about my finances from a woman who hadn't paid for a single thing all night. It was the final insult. I didn't say a word. I simply gave her a small, unreadable smile, put the car in drive, and pulled away from the curb, loving hair standing terror, her mouth slightly agape. I drove 1 block, torned Regat, and pulled into the private, nondescript garage where I kept my other car. And my other vehicle. The garage attendant, a grizzled ex-cop named Gus who knew not to ask questions, simply nodded as I walked past the Corolla and toward the back elevator. The elevator opened directly into a private, climate-controlled hangar, and there it was, the Bell 429, sleek, black, and silent. My pilot, a calm ex-military man named Miller, was already doing his pre-flight check. Alerted by my calendar. "Evening, Mr. Vance," he sighed, his voice even. "Unexpected. Everything all right?" "Everything's perfect, Miller." Aside, my voice colder than I intended. "Take me up. I want to see the city from a distance." As we ascended, the roar of the rotors drowning out everything else, we banked, and for a moment, I could see the street in front of Tiffany or Stephanie's building. She was still there, a tiny, perfect figure under the streetlights, probably still staring at the empty space where my cheap car had been. And then, as the sound of the helicopter finally reached her, I watched her look up. I saw her confusion, her disbelief, as the multi-million-dollar machine I was sitting in climbed into the night sky, leaving her and her shallow, gilded world far below. And in that moment, watching her shrink into insignificance, a radical idea began to form. An escape. The city lights blurred into a glittering tapestry below, a sight that usually filled me with a sense of accomplishment, of ownership. Tonight, it just looked like a web, beautiful, intricate, and suffocating. Miller was silent, expertly guiding the helicopter through the designated flight path, his professionalism a comforting, unobtrusive presence. He knew my moods. He knew when to fly and when to simply be a part of the machine.
Change.
Of plan, Miller, I said into the headset, my voice flat. Take us home, the long way. Understood, sir. We circled the financial district. The glowing logos of banks and investment firms, a monument to a world I had conquered but no longer understood. Or perhaps a world I understood all too well. A world where a 1998 Toyota Corolla was a statement of failure, and a private helicopter was a statement of worth. The sheer idiotic simplicity of it was nauseating. I had spent a decade of my life in a relentless, obsessive pursuit of an idea that had made me a billionaire. And in the process, I had forgotten how to be a person. The date wasn't the cause, it was the catalyst. The final, pathetic data point in a long and soul-crushing study of my own isolation. I thought about my parents, a retired teacher and a carpenter in Ohio. They were proud of. Of course, but they were also bewildered. They didn't understand my life, and when I visited, I felt like a foreigner. My language of acquisitions and quarterly reports utterly alien to their world of PTA meetings and local hardware store gossip. They worried about me. They saw the exhaustion in my eyes that no amount of money could erase. "You need to find a good girl, Ethan," my mom had said on my last visit. "Someone who sees you, not ... All this, she had gestured vaguely at the private jet I'd flown in on, as if it were a Dicessa. She was right. But how? How do you find someone genuine when your entire existence is a headline? Ethan Vance, the tech titan. And Ethan Vance, the reclusive billionaire. My name was a brand. My face, though I avoided cameras, was recognizable enough to be a liability. Any attempt at a normal life was doomed from the start. As we finally approached my penthouse, the landing pad on the roof lighting up to receive us, the idea that had been a spark over Tiffany's apartment building ignited into a full-blown plan. It was insane. It was reckless. It was completely and utterly necessary. I needed to disappear. Not forever, but long enough to remember who I was without the name, without the money. I needed to go somewhere no one knew me. Somewhere a beat-up car was just a car, and a man was just a man. The moment the rotor spun to a halt, I was out of my seat. "Miller," aside, pulling off my headset. "Cancel my schedule. For tomorrow. For the foreseeable future, in fact."
He raised an eyebrow, the only sign of his surprise. Sir?
And I need you to arrange for the Corolla to be given a full tune-up. New tires, everything. I'm going on a road trip. Inside, the penthouse was silent and cold. The floor-to-ceiling windows displaying the city I was about to abandon. I walked straight to my office, a minimalist space dominated by a massive desk and a wall of monitors. I ignored them. I pulled out a map. A real paper map of the United States. A relic I kept for reasons I hadn't understood until now. I closed my eyes, spoon a finger and ira, and let it land. It was a tiny dot in a sea of green, nestled in the mountains of a state I'd only ever flown over. The name was almost too perfect, Havenwood. I picked up the secure line, the one that patched directly to my second-in-command, Sarah Jenkins. She was a genius, a ruthless operator in the boardroom, and the only person on the planet I trusted. With my company. She answered on the first ring, her voice sharp and alert, even at this late hour. Ethan? What's wrong? Nothing's wrong, Sarah, I sighed, a smile touching my lips for the first time all night. In fact, for the first time in a long time, something might be about to go very, very right. You're scaring me, she said flatly. I'm promoting you, I said. Effective immediately. You are the acting CEO of Nexus Dynamics. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. You're either drunk or having a psychotic break, she finally said. Where are you? I'm about to go find out, I replied, staring at the little dot on the map. Just keep the ship afloat, Sarah. I'm going off the grid. I hung up before she could argue, before she could talk me out of it. I knew she would. Handle it. She was a professional. She would curse my name. She would work 20 hours a day, but she would keep the Empire safe. And I was going to find a haven. The next 48 hours were a blur of controlled
Chaos.
While Sarah was presumably putting out the corporate fires my sudden leave of absence had ignited, I was methodically dismantling the life of Ethan Vance. I created a new identity, something simple, untraceable. Leo, I decided. Leo Lombardi. It sounded unassuming. I fabricated a backstory, a freelance writer, recently laid off from a soulless content farm in a mid-sized city, looking for a quieter, more meaningful existence. It was close enough to the truth to be believable. I packed a single duffel bag. Jeans, flannel shirts, hiking boots, the kind of clothes I hadn't worn since college. I left behind the $1,000 suits, the Swiss watches, the entire wardrobe of a man I no longer wanted to be. I transferred a modest sum of money enough to live on for a few months without raising eyebrows to a new bank account under Leo's name. The rest of my fortune, the billions, the stocks, assets, I left in Sarah's capable
Hands. Gus, Tegarga attendant, gave me a long, searching look when I picked up the Corolla.
He'd seen me leave in the helicopter 2 nights before. Now, seeing me in worn denim with a duffel bag slung over my shoulder, getting into this ancient car, he must have thought I'd lost everything. You need anything, Mr. Vance? Hesked, his voice gruff with unspoken concern.
I smiled, a Ganuena, unburdened smile. Just call me Leo, I said.
And no, Gus, I think I have everything I need. Driving out of the city was a revelation. Every mile I put between myself and that glass tower felt like shedding a layer of skin. The relentless hum of the metropolis gave way to the steady drone of the highway. The landscape slowly morphing from concrete and steel to rolling hills and endless trees. I turned off the GPS. I followed the paper map, taking scenic routes, getting intentionally lost, rediscovering the simple joy of the open road. 3 days later, I saw the sign. Welcome to Havenwood. Population 2,147. The town was nestled in a valley, surrounded by a dense forest of pine and oak. The main street was a postcard from a bygone era, brick-faced buildings, with colorful awnings, a town square with a gazebo, a diner with a buzzing neon sign that read, "Eat." It was perfect. It was exactly what I had hoped for. I found the cabin I'd rented online through a local property manager. It was small, rustic, and tucked away on a wooded lot at the edge of town, overlooking a small, clear lake. It smelled of pine and wood smoke. The furniture was old and comfortable. There was no smart TV, no high-speed internet that could handle the demands of a global corporation, just a weak Wi-Fi signal that was probably for the best. I dropped my duffel bag on the floor and walked out onto the small porch. The air was clean, crisp, and filled with the sound of birdsong and the gentle lapping of water against the shore. There were no sirens, no helicopters, no ringing phones, just peace. A profound, soul-deep silence I hadn't realized I was so desperately craving. For the first time in a decade, I felt completely and utterly anonymous. I was just Leo, a writer. A man with a beat-up car and a small cabin. And as I stood there, I felt a flicker of something I hadn't felt since I was that kid in his parents' garage. Hope. The first few days in Havenwood were an exercise in deliberate slowness. I forced myself to unlearn the frantic, minute-by-minute scheduling of my old life. I woke with the sun, not with an alarm. I made coffee on a sputtering, ancient percolator and drank it on the porch, watching the mist burn off the lake. I went for long, aimless walks in the woods, my phone left behind in the cabin, a useless brick with no signal. I needed to establish my cover, to become Leo Lombardi in the eyes of the town. My first foray into the small commercial center was nerve-wracking. In the city, I moved through crowds with a practiced invisibility, head down, avoiding eye contact. Here, that was impossible. People nodded as I passed. The woman at a small grocery store, a cheerful, rosy-cheeked lady, named Marge, asked me where I was from and what brought me to Havenwood. Just needed a change of pace, I sighed, trying out Leo's backstory for the first time. I'm a writer. Needed some quiet. Well, you've come to the right place, she'd beamed. There's not much excitement here, but the quiet is top-notch. The quiet was exactly what I needed. But I also needed a focal point, a place to anchor my new, simple routine. I found it on my third day, tucked between the hardware store and the town's only bakery. It was a small shop with a faded green sign that read, in elegant, curling script, The Reading Nook. The bell above the door chimed softly as I entered, and I was hit with that intoxicating, almost sacred smell of old paper and binding glue. It was a temple of a bookstore. Books were everywhere, not just on the shelves, but stacked. In precarious, teetering towers on the floor, spilling from armchairs, creating a wonderful, literary labyrinth. Sunlight streamed through the large front window, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air like tiny, golden fairies. And then I saw her. She was standing on a rolling ladder, reaching for a thick, leather-bound volume on a high shelf. She had a smudge of what looked like ink on her cheek, and hair higher, a cascade of unruly brown curls, was haphazardly tied up with a pencil. She wore paint-splattered overalls over a simple t-shirt, and she was humming softly to herself, completely absorbed in her task. She wasn't polished like Tiffany. She wasn't wearing a designer dress or sporting a manicure. She was real, so startlingly, breathtakingly real that I actually forgot to breathe for a moment. She must have sensed me standing there because she turned, her movements nimble and sure on the ladder. She had warm, intelligent eyes, the color of moss after a rain, and they crinkled at the corners when she smiled. Well, hello there, Seth sighed, her voice as warm and inviting as the store itself. Don't see many new faces around here. Can I help you find something? Or are you just here to soak in the atmosphere? I felt my throat go dry. For a man who had addressed auditoriums filled with thousands of people, who had negotiated billion-dollar deals with the world's most ruthless CEOs, I was suddenly, inexplicably, speechless.
I stammered, feeling like a teenager.
Just looking. Her smile widened. The best way to be, she said. The best books are the ones you find when you're not looking for them. I'm Clara, by the way. She hopped down from the ladder with a soft thud, extending a hand. Her handshake was firm, her palm slightly calloused. Leo, I sighed, the name feeling both foreign and strangely right on my tongue. Leo, Sarah repeated, tilting her head. Welcome to the reading nook. Let me know if you get lost. It happens. She turned back to her books, leaving me to wander the chaotic aisles. But I wasn't looking at the books anymore. I was utterly, completely, and hopelessly captivated by the woman with the ink smudge on her cheek and a pencil in her hair. And I knew, with a certainty that shook me to my core, that my simple, quiet life in Havenwood was about to get a lot more complicated. I started to make the reading nook a part of my daily ritual. I'd spend the mornings at the cabin, pretending to write, which mostly consisted of staring at a blank screen and thinking about Clara. Then, in the afternoon, I'd wander into town and inevitably find myself pushing open the door. With the little chiming bell. I told myself it was for the coffee. She had a small, self-serve coffee station in a corner, with a jar for donations. The coffee was terrible, brewed in the same kind of ancient machine as mine. But I drank it dutifully. It was my excuse to linger, to absorb the peaceful energy of the place, to watch her. She was a whirlwind of quiet, focused energy. She moved through her store with a deep, intrinsic knowledge of where every book was, recommending titles to the town's few but loyal customers, her face lighting up when she talked about a story she loved. Our conversation started small. We talked about books, of course. I discovered she had a fierce love for classic literature and a surprising soft spot for gritty crime novels. She learned that Leo, was supposedly working on a novel about a man who leaves his life behind to find simplicity. A bit on the nose, don't you think? Said, her mossy eyes sparkling with mirth. All the best stories are, it replied, feeling a blush creep up my neck. One afternoon, I found her sitting at her small, cluttered desk. At the back of the store, staring at a pile of bills with a deep frown line between her brows. The usual light in her eyes was dimmed. Everything okay? Esked, setting my coffee mug down. She sighed, running a hand through her already messy hair. Just the usual. Sighed, her voice tired. The eternal battle of art versus commerce. Or, in this case, books versus rent. Business is slow? I ventured. It's not slow. It's changing, sighed, gesturing around the store. People love the idea of a small, independent bookstore. They love the smell and the atmosphere. But then they go home and order the book from some online giant for $3 less. I'm competing with algorithms, Leo, and it's a fight I'm not sure I can win. There it was. The irony was so thick I could have choked on it. Ethan Vance was one of those giants. Nexus Dynamics didn't sell books. But our logistics and e-commerce platforms powered the very companies that were slowly strangling businesses like hers. I was the algorithm she was fighting. The feeling was sickening, a cold knot of guilt tightening in my stomach. I'm sorry, I sighed, the words feeling hollow and inadequate. She looked up at me and her expression softened. It's not your fault, sighed with a weary smile. It's just the way the world works. I love this place. It was my grandmother's. It's more than a business to me. It's home. In that moment, I wanted nothing more than to solve her problem. It would be so easy. A single/anonymous wire transfer. An angel investor. I could set up a trust, funnel the money so it was completely untraceable. I could save her store, erase that worry from her face, and she would never have to know. But I couldn't. That was Ethan Vance's solution.
Throw money at the problem until it goes away. Leo Lombardi couldn't do that.
Leo Lombardi had a few $1,000s to his name and a beat-up car. To do more would be to break the one rule I had set for myself. It would be cheating. So instead I heard myself say, what if you hosted events? Book clubs, poetry readings, a story hour for kids. She looked at me, intrigued. I've thought about it. I don't have the time or the energy to organize it all by myself. I could help, I sighed, the words tumbling out before I could stop them. I'm just sitting in my cabin all day, pretending to write. I could use the distraction. I can make flyers, help you set up. Her eyes searched my face, looking for something. A motive, maybe. In my world, no one did anything for free. But here / maybe they did. Finally, she smiled. A real, genuine smile that reached her eyes and made the whole dusty, sun-drenched store seem brighter. You've got a deal. But I'm warning you, I'd pay in coffee and leftover pastries from the bakery next door. It's the best salary I've been offered in years, I sighed, and I meant it. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of activity, but it was a different kind of whirlwind from the one I was used to. It wasn't fueled by caffeine and pressure, but by Clara's terrible coffee and a shared sense of purpose. We became a team. I designed simple, charming flyers on my laptop, and we posted them all over town, at the grocery store, the post office, the diner. We rearranged a corner of the bookstore, clearing away a teetering pile of forgotten hardcovers to create a small, cozy event space. Clara was transformed. The project gave her a new focus, a new energy. The worry I'd seen in her eyes was replaced by a familiar sparkle. We worked side by side, our hands brushing as we moved chairs, our heads bent close together over lists and schedules. I learned the rhythm of her sighs, the cadence of her laughter. I learned that she chewed on her lip when she was concentrating and that she had a tiny scar above her left eyebrow from a childhood tree-climbing accident. I was falling for her. Hard. It was a terrifying, exhilarating free fall, completely unlike the calculated, cautious relationships of my past. With Clara, there was no artifice. There was just this / this pull. This feeling of rightness. Our first event was a poetry open mic night. We set up a dozen chairs, brewed a fresh pot of awful coffee, and waited. For the first 20 minutes, it was just us. Clara paced nervously, convinced it was a failure. No one's coming, Sehe whispered, wringing her hands. They'll come, I sighed, trying to sound more confident than I felt. And then, the bell on the door chimed. It was Marge from the grocery store. Then the owner of the hardware store, a shy, burly man named Frank. A few high school kids, looking awkward and excited. Soon, all the chairs were filled, and people were leaning against the bookshelves. Frank, the hardware store owner, got up and read a surprisingly tender poem about fixing a leaky faucet for his wife. Marge read a hilarious limerick about a zucchini that took over her garden. One of the teenagers read a raw, emotional piece about feeling trapped in a small town. It was amazing. It was real. It was community. At the end of the night, after the last person had left, a buzz of energy remained in the little store. I can't believe it, Clara said, her face glowing. That was / magical. You did it, I said. No, she corrected, stepping closer to me. We did it. And then she was standing right in front of me, the space between. US charged with all the unspoken things that had been building for weeks. The air grew thick, and the only sound was the distant hum of the coffee pot. She looked up at me, her mossy eyes searching mine, and I knew that if I didn't kiss her in that moment, I would regret it for the rest of my life. So I did. It was a soft, tentative kiss at first, a question. And then she answered, her hand coming up to cup my jaw, her lips pressing against mine with a certainty that took my breath away. It wasn't the fiery, dramatic kiss of a movie. It was better. It was quiet and gentle, and it felt like coming home. But as I held her, the scent of old books and coffee filling my senses, a cold, sharp sliver of guilt pierced through the warmth. This perfect moment, this perfect feeling, was built on a lie. She was kissing Leo, the broke writer. She had no idea that she was in the arms of Ethan Vance, the man whose world was the antithesis of everything she held dear. And I had no idea how I was ever going to tell her the truth, The storm came without warning. Not a meteorological one, though the autumn sky outside the cabin was a bruised, angry purple. This storm arrived through the cabins. Weak Wi-Fi signal. A digital tempest that threatened to shatter the fragile peace I had so carefully constructed. It came in the form of a single, encrypted email from Sarah. The subject line was just one word: emergency. My blood ran cold. Sarah was not prone to exaggeration. For her to use that word meant that something was catastrophically wrong. For the past few weeks, I had been blissfully, willfully ignorant of the goings-on at Nexus Dynamics. I'd told her only to contact me if the world was ending. Apparently, it was. I huddled over my laptop, the glow of the screen illuminating my face in the dim cabin light. The email was brief and brutal. Marcus Thorne, our most ruthless competitor, the CEO of a rival tech giant called Omnicorp, had launched an audacious and aggressive hostile takeover bid. He'd been quietly buying up shares, and now he was making his move, trying to wrest control of the company I had built from the ground up.
He's using your absence against us, Sarah wrote.
Painting you as an unstable, absentee leader. The board is spooked. I'm holding them off, but I need you. Now. A wave of nausea washed over me. Marcus Thorne. He was a corporate shark, a man who viewed business not as innovation, but as conquest. He represented everything I had tried to escape. The greed, the ego, relentless, soul-crushing pursuit of power for its own sake. And he was at the gates of my kingdom. My first instinct was to ignore it, to delete the email, shut the laptop, and pretend it never happened. Nexus Dynamics, the money, the power. It all felt like a dream from another life. My life was here now. In this cabin.
In the reading nook, with Clara.
But then I thought of the thousands of employees who depended on Nexus, the engineers, head designers, the support staff. I thought of the projects we were working on, initiatives aimed at using technology for good, projects that Thorne would gut and sell for parts without a second thought. I had a responsibility. I couldn't just let it all burn. My hands trembled as I typed a reply. Give me 24 hours. I'll handle it. Handling it meant phone calls. Dozens of them. To board members, to investors, to my legal team. Calls I couldn't make from a cabin with spotty cell service. Calls I couldn't make with Clara nearby. The next morning, I told her I had a family emergency. The lie tasted like ash in my mouth. Is everything okay? She asked, her face a portrait of concern. She reached out and took my hand, her touch a stark contrast to the cold dread coiling in my gut. Yeah, it's my uncle, I stammered, hating myself with every word. He's not well. I have to go back to ... to the city for a day or two to help out. Of course, she said without hesitation. Go, don't worry about the store, just ... be safe. The trust in her eyes was like a physical blow. I drove away from Havenwood that morning feeling like a traitor. The drive back to the city was a grim, high-speed journey back to a life I didn't want. I had to swap the Corolla for a nondescript rental car at a suburban airport, a necessary precaution. I checked into a sterile business hotel. Under a different alias, my mind already racing, shifting from Leo to Gantlo Reter, back to Ethan Vance, the corporate tactician. The next 24 hours were a brutal, sleepless marathon of phone calls and video conferences. I was a ghost in the machine, a disembodied voice from a secure line, rallying my allies, shoring up defenses, fighting a war from a hotel room. I was sharp, it was ruthless. I was the man who had built Nexus Dynamics. And I hated every second of it. We managed to beat back the initial assault. I convinced the board to hold the line, leveraging every ounce of my influence, calling in favors I had spent years accumulating. The Thorns bid was rejected, for now. But I knew it was just the first battle. A man like Marcus Thorne doesn't give up easily. He'd be back, and he'd hit harder next time. Exhausted, drained, I finally collapsed onto the hotel bed, the city lights twinkling mockingly outside my window. I had won. I had saved my company. But the victory felt hollow. I had lied to Clara. I had abandoned the simple, honest life I was trying to build. And as I stared at the ceiling, a terrible thought occurred to me. Maybe I couldn't have both. Maybe the time was coming when I would have to choose between Ethan Vance and Leo Lombardi. And I was terrified that no matter which one I chose, I would lose the only thing that had started to feel real, Clara. Returning to Havenwood felt like crossing a border into another country. Another reality. The air changed, losing its sharp, metallic city edge and softening into the familiar scent of pine and damp earth. My shoulders, which had been knotted with tension for 2 straight days, began to unclench. I was Leo again. Or at least I was trying to be. But the duality was taking its toll. The lies were starting to pile up, creating a heavy, invisible barrier between me and Clara. She welcomed me back with a hug that I felt I didn't deserve. She asked about my uncle, and I spun. A vague tale of recovery, the words feeling clumsy and false on my tongue. You seem tired? Say sighed, studying my face, her perceptive eyes missing nothing, / and stressed. Just worried, I deflected. It was a long couple of days. I tried to slip back into the comfortable rhythm of our life. We organized another event at the bookstore, a children's story hour that was a chaotic, joyful success. We went for a long hike in the woods, the autumn leaves crunching under our boots. For moments at a time, I could almost forget the storm brewing on the horizon. I could almost believe that I was just Leo, a man in love with a wonderful woman in a small, peaceful town. But the ghost of Ethan Vance was always there, lurking in the shadows. It was there in the clandestine, late-night calls I had to take from Sarah, huddled in my car at the edge of town where I could get a decent signal. It was there in the way my mind would drift during conversations, churning over market caps and shareholder value. Clara wasn't stupid. She knew something was wrong. The easy intimacy we had shared was now punctuated by moments of awkward silence. A wall was going up, brick by brick, and I was the one building it. Leo, she said one evening as we were closing the bookstore. Her voice was quiet, serious. You know you can talk to me, right? About anything? No, I sighed, avoiding her gaze, busying myself with straightening a pile of paperbacks. Is it about your old job? She pressed gently. You said you were laid off? Is there something / messy there? Something you're not telling me? It was the perfect out. A lifeline. I could have built on that lie, created a story about a difficult ex-boss or a non-disclosure agreement. It would have been plausible. It would have satisfied her curiosity, at least for a while. But I was so tired of the lies. It's complicated. Aside, my voice barely a whisper. And in that moment of weakness, of cowardice, I saw a flicker of hurt in her eyes. By trying to protect her, I was pushing her away. My silence was more damaging than any lie I could have told. The very next day, a package arrived for me at the post office. It wasn't addressed to Leo Lombardi. It was a thick, corporate envelope, sent via an ultra-secure courier, and it was addressed to Ethan Vance. Sarah had messed up. Or, more likely, her new assistant had. A small mistake, but one with potentially catastrophic consequences. The postmistress, a notorious town gossip named Beatrice, peered at the label over her spectacles. Ethan Vance? Sarah sighed, her voice booming in the small, quiet post office. That's a new one. You got a secret identity. Leo? She laughed, a low, braying sound. I felt the blood drain from my face. I mumbled something about it being a mistake, a mix-up from my old life, and snatched the envelope from her hand. I walked out in a daze, my heart pounding. I didn't see Clara, who had been coming out of the bakery next door. But she saw me, and she saw the name on the envelope. I didn't know it at the time, but she saw everything. The look on my face, the speed with which I hurried away. Another brick in the wall. Another seed of doubt planted in the fertile ground of my secrecy. That night, as a cold rain lashed against the windows of my cabin, I knew. I was running out of time. The two worlds I was trying to keep separate were beginning to collide, and the fallout was going to be devastating. Marcus Thorne was still out there, a predator circling its prey. And Clara, the one person I couldn't bear to lose, was getting closer to a truth that I was terrified would destroy everything. The breaking point arrived with the subtlety of a sledgehammer. It came, as most modern disasters do, via a news alert that pinned on the burner phone I kept for emergencies. I was in the cabin, trying to force myself to write, to do the one thing Leo Lombardi was actually supposed to be doing. The alert was from a major financial news network. Marcus Thorne of Omnicorp goes public with Nexus takeover, accuses founder Ethan Vance of abandoning company, calls leadership into question. I clicked the link, my hands slick with sweat. There was a video. Marcus Thorne, standing in front of a wall of cameras, looking sleek and predatory in a ridiculously expensive suit. He was a master of corporate theater, and this was his command performance. Nexus Dynamics is a titan of the industry. Aside, his voice smooth and laced with false sincerity. But a ship of that size cannot be left without its captain, Ethan Vance. It's brilliant, but erratic founder has vanished. He has abandoned his post, his employees, his shareholders. We at Omnicorp are not looking for a conquest. We are offering a lifeline. We are offering stability. We are offering a future. It was a brilliant, venomous attack. He was using my quest for a real life as a weapon against me. He was painting me as a flake, a coward, a modern-day Howard Hughes, locking myself away while my empire crumbled. He was poisoning the well, turning my own board against me, making a public spectacle of it all. My phone started ringing almost immediately. It was Sarah. You saw it. Cecide, no preamble. Her voice was strained. He's declared all-out war, Ethan. He's forcing a shareholder vote. He's trying to get you ousted.
I know, I sighed, my voice grim. I saw.
You have to come back, she pleaded. You have to face him. Show them you're still here, still in charge. We need you to fight. I knew she was right. This wasn't a battle I could win from a cabin in the woods. I had to go back. I had to put on the suit, step into the spotlight, and destroy Marcus Thorne in the arena he understood best, the public stage. But what about Clara? The thought of leaving again, of spinning more lies, made me feel physically ill. The foundation of our relationship was already so fragile, so compromised. Another unexplained disappearance might shatter it completely. I had to tell her, maybe not everything. Not the whole, unsolid truth, but something. Something more than a family emergency. I found her at the bookstore, quietly shelving a new shipment of books. The setting sun cast long shadows through the front window.
Clara, I beggin', my heart hammering against my ribs. I have to leave town again, for a few days.
She didn't look up. She just placed a book on the shelf with painstaking precision. Another sick uncle? Say, Esked, her voice devoid of emotion. The question hit me like a punch to the gut.
No, I said softly. It's complicated.
It's about my old life. There's a business problem. A very serious one. Someone is trying to take something from me. Something I built. She finally turned to face me. Her arms were crossed, her expression unreadable. The thing you built, Leo, does it have a name? I hesitated. Clara ... I saw the package at the post office, Cecide, her voice flat. The one for Ethan Vance. I googled the name. My world tilted on its axis. The blood roared in my ears. It's quite a story, she continued, her voice dangerously calm. The boy genius, the reclusive billionaire, founder of Nexus Dynamics. Is that the something that Marcus Thorne is trying to take from you? I couldn't speak. I could only stand there, exposed, the flimsy costume of Leo Lombardi ripped away, leaving me standing in the ruins of my own deception. All this time, Sehe whispered, and now I could hear the pain in her voice. A day up, trembling hurt that was far worse than anger. The simple writer. The man escaping the soulless corporate world. Was any of it real? Or was this all just a game to you? A little vacation from your real life? Were you just slumming Ethan? She spat my name like it was a curse. No, I sighed, taking a step toward her. No, Clara, that's not what this was. This place. This is the only thing that's felt real to me in years. How can I believe that? She cried, tears finally welling in her eyes. Your entire existence here has been a lie. Who are you? The man who fixes my shelves and kisses? Me in the dark? Or the man on the cover of Forbes magazine who could buy this entire town and not even notice? I'm both. I sighed, my voice filled with a desperation I'd never known. And I'm so sorry, Clara. I was going to tell you. I was just so scared of losing this. You've already lost it, she sighed, her voice breaking. She took a step back, away from my outstretched hand, creating a chasm between us that felt as wide as the gap between my two lives. You need to go. Go fight for your company, Mr. Vance. That's the world you belong to. She turned her back on me, a final, devastating dismissal. I stood there for a long moment, the silence of the bookstore pressing in on me. I had come to Havenwood to find something genuine, something true, and I had found it. Only to destroy it with my own cowardice. As I walked out of the reading nook, leaving Clara alone with her broken heart and my broken promises, I knew that the fight with Marcus Thorne was no longer just about my company. It was about proving to myself, and maybe someday, to her, that the man she had fallen for, Leo, was not a lie. He was the truest part of me. The flight back to the city was a grim, silent affair. This time, there was no pretense. Miller had the helicopter waiting at a private airfield an hour's drive from Havenwood. As we lifted off, I watched the patchwork of forests and fields shrink below, feeling like I was being forcibly ejected from Eden. Every mile eastward was a betrayal of the man I wanted to be. I landed on the roof of my penthouse, a place that now felt alien and sterile. Sarah was waiting for me inside. She looked exhausted, but her eyes were sharp, ready for battle. He's a cockroach, she sighed, handing me a tablet loaded with data, and we're going to squash him. The next few days were a blur of war room strategy sessions. Lawyers, PR specialists, financial analysts, the generals of my corporate army marched in and out of my apartment. We dissected Thorne's every move, anticipated his every attack. I was back in my element, the commander-in-chief, making decisions with cold, calculated precision. But my heart wasn't in it. During a lull in the chaos, I stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows, looking down at the city. All this, I thought. All this power, all this wealth, and all it had brought me was a profound, crushing loneliness. I would trade it all, every last billion, for one more quiet afternoon in the reading nook, listening to Clara talk about books, the scent of old paper in the air. The shareholder meeting was scheduled for the end of the week. It was to be the final showdown. Thorne had requested to make his case in person. He wanted a public spectacle, a trial by media, and I was going to give it to him. The night before the meeting, I couldn't sleep. Found myself in my closet, a vast, walk-in space filled with bespoke suits. I pushed them aside, looking for the duffel bag I had taken to Havenwood. I pulled out one of the flannel shirts I had worn. It still smelled faintly of wood smoke and Clara's bookstore. I held it to my face, breathing in the memory of a life that felt 1,000,000 miles away. That's when I knew what I had to do. I couldn't fight Thorne on his terms. I couldn't win by being a better version of him. I had to win by being me, the real me, the man who had emerged in that small town. The next morning, I walked into the cavernous, glass-walled boardroom where the fate of my company would be decided. The room was packed. Board members, major shareholders, and a phalanx of reporters. Marcus Thorne was already there, holding court, exuding smug confidence. He was wearing a suit that probably cost more than the Corolla. I was not. I was wearing jeans, a simple, dark shirt, and the flannel shirt I had held the night before. A murmur went through the room. Thorn's eyes widened, first in disbelief, then in predatory glee. He thought I was proving his point. The unstable, erratic founder. The captain who had lost his mind. He was wrong. Thorn, folk first. He gave a slick, polished presentation full of charts and projections, painting a picture of Nexus as a rudderless ship and himself as its savior. He talked about maximizing shareholder value, about synergy, about aggressive growth. He used all the right words, but they were hollow. Lifeless. Then, it was my turn. I walked to the podium. I didn't have a presentation. I didn't have a script. I just had the truth. Good morning, it began, my voice. Calm and clear. My name is Ethan Vance, and for the past few months, I have been living in a small town under a different name. I drove a 20-year-old car, I lived in a small cabin, and I told people I was a writer. The room was silent. The reporters were scribbling furiously. Thorn was smiling, certain I was digging my own grave. Mr. Thorn has accused me of abandoning my company, I continued, my eyes scanning the faces of the board members. The people who had invested in me, in my vision. And in a way, Hesrik, I did leave. I left because I was suffocating. I was suffocating under the weight of what this company has become, what I had become. I went looking for something real, something that couldn't be quantified on a balance sheet. I paused, letting the words sink in. I found it. I found it in a place where people help their neighbors not because it's profitable, but because it's the right thing to do. I found it with people who value community over capital, who value connection over commerce. And in doing so, I remembered why I started Nexus Dynamics in the first place. I turned my gaze directly to Thorn. I didn't start this company to maximize shareholder value. I started it to build things, to create tools that connect people, that make their lives better. That vision, somewhere along the way, got lost. Mr. Thorn's vision for this company, aside gesturing toward him, is one of profit and power. He would strip it for parts, lay off thousands of loyal employees, and call it efficiency. He sees a financial asset. I see a legacy, and I see a responsibility. I looked back at the board. I am not the same man I was a few months ago. This /experience has changed me. It has reminded me what truly matters. And I am asking you today, not to choose between me and Mr. Thorn. I am asking you to choose what kind of company you want Nexus Dynamics to be. Do you want a soulless machine dedicated to profit? Or do you want a company with a conscience? A company that remembers that its greatest asset is its people, and its greatest purpose is to serve them. I'm back. And I'm ready to lead, but I will lead it my way. I finished and stood there, my heart pounding, the silence in the room absolute. I had laid myself bare, offered them my true self, not the corporate titan they expected. And then, from the back of the room, someone started to
clap. It was one of the oldest board members, a man who had been with me from the beginning. Then another joined in.
And another. Soon, the entire room, save for Thorn and his cronies, was filled with applause. Thorn's face was a mask of fury and disbelief. He had lost. I hadn't beaten him at his own game. I had changed the rules. As the vote was officially cast, a formality at that point, I felt not a sense of triumph, but of quiet resolve. I had won the battle for my company. But the war for my soul, the one that mattered most, was waiting for me in a small town called Havenwood. Winning back my company was a matter of logic and strategy. Winning back Clara was going to be a matter of heart and humility, something I was far less practiced in. I didn't rush back to Havenwood. That would have been the old Ethan's move. Throw himself at the problem, expect a quick resolution. Leo, the man I now knew was the better part of me, understood that this wound needed time and care to heal. I spent the next week in the city, not as a recluse in a penthouse, Buddhist invisible, active leader. I held a town hall with my employees, laid out my new vision for the company, one focused on sustainable growth, employee well-being, and a new massive philanthropic arm dedicated to supporting small businesses and community projects. I made it clear that the soul of Nexus was not for sale. The news of my speech, my unorthodox attire, and my new corporate direction had gone viral. I was no longer just a billionaire. I was a billionaire with a story. A story that started in Havenwood. I knew Clara would see it. The whole world had seen it. I hoped she would see beyond the headlines and recognize the truth in my words. Before I left, I made one final crucial arrangement. It wasn't about money, not directly. It was about using my resources in a way that Leo would have if he'd had them. It was about honoring her world, not invading it. When I finally drove back into Havenwood, it was in the Corolla. The sleek rental was a memory. The helicopter was grounded. I was just Leo, coming home. I didn't go straight to the bookstore. I went to the town square. The gazebo was decorated with flowers, and a small crowd was gathered. At the center of it was Clara, standing next to a smiling Marge from the grocery store and Frank from the hardware store. I hung back, watching from a distance. A local news reporter was there, a young woman with a microphone.
Clara, she was saying, can you tell us how it feels?
To be the first recipient of the Havenwood grant from the new Nexus Foundation? Clara looked overwhelmed, her eyes shining. I don't know what to say. This grant. It's not just for me. It's for the Reading Nook. It means we can keep our doors open. It means we can expand our community programs. It means this place, which has been a part of Havenwood for 50 years, gets to have a future. And the foundation, the reporter pressed. It was founded by Ethan Vance. There are rumors he spent some time here. Do you know him? My heart stopped. This was the moment. Clara took a deep breath. I know a man named Leo, Cecide, her voice clear and steady. He was a writer. He loved this town. And he believed in the power of community. She looked out at the crowd, and for a second, her eyes seemed to find mine, even from across the square. As for Mr. Vance, it seems he does too. It wasn't forgiveness, but it was a start. It was an acknowledgement. She hadn't erased Leo. Later that day, I gathered all the courage I had and walked to the Reading Nook. The bell chimed, the same soft sound that had marked the beginning of this journey. She was behind the counter, just as she had been the first time I saw her. She looked up when I came in, her expression guarded. Hello, Clara, I said softly. Hello, Ethan, she replied. The name didn't sound like a curse anymore. It was just a name. I didn't do it to buy your forgiveness, I sighed, needing her to understand. The foundation. It's not about that. It's about taking what you taught me here, about community and trying to do some good with it. It's the only way I know how to bridge the two parts of my life. She was silent for a long moment, just looking at me. Why did you lie to me? She finally asked, the question simple, direct, and piercing. Because I was a coward, I sighed, the admission costing me nothing because it was the absolute truth. I was so terrified that you would look at me and only see the money, taneme, the construct, the way everyone else does, and what we had, what I felt with you. It was too precious to risk. I was wrong. I should have trusted you. I should have trusted Oos. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a small worn paperback. It was a copy of her favorite book, one she had recommended to me weeks ago. Inside the front cover, I had written a dedication. For Clara, the best story I ever found when I wasn't looking for it. Leo. I placed it on the counter between us. She picked it up, her fingers tracing the cover. She opened it and read the inscription. A single tear escaped her eye and splashed onto the page. Leo was real, I whispered. He's the most real part of me. She looked up at me, her mossy green eyes full of 1,000 complicated emotions. Hurt was still there. But so was something else. Hope. It's a nice story, Ethan. Cecide, her voice thick with emotion. But it's going. To take more than one chapter to fix it. A slow smile spread across my face. I'm not going anywhere, I said. I've got all the time in the world. And I'm a writer, remember? I'm pretty good with long stories. She didn't smile back, not yet. But she didn't turn away either. She just stood there, holding my book, holding my hope in her hands. And for the first time, I felt like both Ethan and Leo standing in the same room, in the same life. And I knew, no matter how long it took, I was finally home.